My name is Madison Cole, and if you asked anyone who walks into my office today, they'd probably tell you I have it all figured out. The sleek glass desk, the high-rise view of Manhattan, the fresh orchids on the corner table. Everything whispers of control, of success, of someone who made it. But the truth? Behind the calm smile I wear like a silk scarf, there's a history that still burns at the edges of my memory. This morning, my phone buzzed against a mahogany surface, vibrating with a calendar reminder. I already knew what it was before I even looked. The meeting. That meeting. I stood up, smoothing the cream-colored blouse that felt soft under my fingertips. My reflection in the window caught me. Confident posture, bold lipstick, sharp heels clicking against polished floors. I looked like the kind of woman who never doubted herself. But I remembered. I remembered the sting of laughter in a crowded office, the way his words had cut into me years ago like a dull blade. Nice try, sweetheart. Maybe stick to fetching coffee. And now, today, he was on his way to meet me. Not as my boss. Not as the man who once mocked every effort I made. He was coming to meet me as my partner. The irony was almost too perfect. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. Because this wasn't just business. This was a full-circle moment, one I had waited for in silence, nursing every wound into fuel. And now, the fuel had turned into fire. A few years ago, I wasn't the woman with the corner office. I was just a 23-year-old assistant at Caldwell & Rowe, clutching a second-hand laptop and praying no one noticed how nervous I was every single day. I remember one moment in particular. It's burned into my mind like a scar. I had spent 3 nights working on a proposal. I believed in it so deeply I could feel it in my bones. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, my ideas, my vision. I thought maybe, just maybe, it would show that I was more than the girl who ordered sandwiches and scheduled meetings. The conference room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and printer ink that morning. My palms were slick against the papers I held. When it was my turn, I cleared my throat and began, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained the concept. Halfway through, I saw him, Daniel Hartman, my boss, leaning back in his leather chair, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at his mouth. By the time I finished, his chuckle broke the silence. Creative effort, Madison, he said, drawing out my name like it was a joke. But this isn't college. Clients don't pay for daydreams. Next time, leave the strategy to people who know what they're doing. The room erupted in polite laughter, the kind people give when they don't want to anger the man in charge. My throat tightened. My hands shook so badly, I had to grip the edge of the table. The sting of humiliation was sharp, hot, unbearable. I wanted to disappear. Instead, I forced myself to nod, mumbling something like understood. But inside, a different voice whispered, "Remember this. Don't you ever forget this." That night, I went home to my tiny apartment, collapsed onto my thrift store couch, and cried until my eyes swelled shut. But before sleep came, I remembered something my grandmother once told me. She'd given me a small silver locket on my 18th birthday. Inside, a tiny engraving read, "Prove them wrong." I held it in my palm that night, fingers curled tight around it as if it could shield me from the shame. And then I made a decision. If Daniel thought I was nothing but a coffee-fetching assistant, fine. Let him think that. Because one day, I'd build something he couldn't laugh at. One day, I wouldn't be asking for a seat at his table. I'd have my own. And that day started the moment I walked away from Caldwell & Rowe. Leaving Caldwell & Rowe felt like freefall. I didn't have a backup plan or money or connections. Just a bruised ego, a silver locket, and a fire inside me that wouldn't burn out. At first, I took whatever freelance work I could find, designing marketing flyers for local bakeries, managing social media for a dentist's office, even writing copy for a dog-walking app that never took off. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every late-night project taught me something new, sharpening the edges of my skills. The nights were the hardest. I'd sit at my rickety desk in that cramped apartment, surrounded by half-empty coffee cups, doubting myself. Sometimes, I'd stare at the blinking cursor and hear Daniel's mocking voice in my head. Clients don't pay for daydreams. But then I'd unclasp that silver locket, press it against my chest, and whisper, "Prove them wrong." That phrase became my heartbeat. One turning point came when I met Rachel Myers, a sharp, seasoned consultant who had built her own agency after walking away from corporate life. She was the first person in the industry who looked at me and didn't see a naive girl. She saw potential. "I like your ideas," she told me over coffee in a noisy Brooklyn cafe. "They're raw, but they're real. Don't polish out your voice trying to sound like everyone else. Use it." Rachel took me under her wing, giving me projects others would have dismissed me from. She didn't coddle me, she challenged me, pushed me to pitch, to take risks, to fail and learn. And slowly it started to work. My first big client was a small eco-friendly skincare brand run by a husband and wife team. I poured everything into their campaign. Long nights, endless drafts, countless doubts. When their sales doubled in 3 months, they sent me flowers and a handwritten note. "You believed in us before anyone else did. Thank you." That moment was a crack of light through the darkness. Word spread. One client became 3. 3 became 10. My little one-woman operation turned into a registered business, Cole Strategies, with Rachel advising me on the side. But I kept my success quiet. On social media, I posted nothing flashy. To old coworkers, I was just freelancing. To family, I downplayed everything, saying I was still figuring it out. Because I wanted my work, not my words, to speak for me when the time came. The years blurred into a grind of risk and reward. I made mistakes, lost clients, doubted myself again and again. But every failure fueled the determination. I built a small team, 2 designers, a copywriter, and account manager. Together, we landed contracts I never would have dreamed of back at Caldwell and Rowe. And then, the big break. A national retail brand signed us for a campaign. The project's success didn't just lift their numbers. It put my agency on the map. Suddenly, Cole Strategies wasn't a scrappy startup anymore. We were competition. And that's when I heard his name again. Daniel Hartman. He didn't know it yet, but the girl he once mocked had become the woman running a firm powerful enough to sit across from his. And soon, our paths would collide again. The morning of the meeting, the city skyline glittered like it was in on my secret. Sunlight bounced off the glass towers as I stood in my office, rehearsing nothing, because I didn't need to. I was ready. My assistant buzzed through the intercom. "Miss Cole, Daniel Hartman has arrived." For a moment, my breath caught. The name still had weight. But when I glanced around my office, at the abstract art I'd chosen myself, the shelves lined with awards my agency had earned, the framed note from my first grateful client, I felt anchored. "Send him in," I said, my voice steady. The door opened, and there he was. Daniel. Older now, but still wearing that air of authority, the tailored suit, the confident stride. Except this time, his confidence faltered when his eyes swept the room. "Madison," he said, almost laughing, like he wasn't sure if this was real. I smiled, calm and deliberate. "It's Miss Cole, actually. Welcome to my office." He blinked, glancing around again, as if the space itself contradicted every memory he had of me. The orchids, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the team photos on the wall, it all told a story he'd never bothered to imagine. We sat across from each other at the glass conference table. For a moment, silence stretched between us. I let him feel it, the weight of the shift. "So," he finally said, forcing a chuckle, "Cole Strategies. Impressive. I had no idea you went out on your own." "That was the point," I replied softly. "You never noticed me when I was under your nose. Why would I expect you to notice me after I left?" A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. He shifted in his chair, but I kept my gaze steady. The truth landed then, as I leaned forward. "We're not here because you're interviewing me. We're here because your firm needs mine. And because of the merger," I paused, savoring the irony. "We're partners now." His jaw tightened. For the first time, Daniel Hartman didn't look like the untouchable boss. He looked cornered. "You," he said, incredulous. "My partner." "Yes," I said simply, leaning back with measured grace. Your partner. Equals stake. Equals say. He let out a short, humorless laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. Well, this is unexpected. I tilted my head, a hint of a smile playing at my lips. Is it? You taught me a long time ago that my ideas were worthless, that I wasn't cut out for strategy, that I should stick to coffee runs. And you know what? You were right about one thing. His brow furrowed. Which is? I let the words hang in the air, sharp as glass. I didn't belong fetching coffee for you. I belonged building something of my own. Silence. Heavy, thick, undeniable. He looked away, just for a moment, as if he couldn't stand the reflection of what he had dismissed years ago. I let him sit with it. Let him process the reality that the young woman he once mocked into tears was now the woman who held half the power in his next big venture. The role reversal was almost poetic. Finally, I broke the silence. This partnership can work, Daniel. But understand this. Things won't look the way they used to. Not here. Not with me. His eyes flicked back to mine, searching for some trace of the timid girl he once knew. He didn't find her, because she no longer existed. I leaned back in my chair, crossing one leg over the other. The room felt charged, like the air before a summer storm. Daniel's smirk had faded, replaced with something harder to name, unease, maybe even regret. This partnership will only work on one condition, I said evenly. He arched an eyebrow. And what would that be? That you leave the past at the door. I held his gaze, unblinking. No condescension. No dismissals. You treat me as an equal, or this deal falls apart before it begins. His lips parted like he was about to protest, but then he closed them again. Silence. I let it linger, then continued. You see, Daniel, I built Kohl's strategies from the ground up. I earned every client, every contract, every late-night win. My team looks at me and sees a leader, not because I demanded it, but because I proved it. If you're going to work with me, you'll have to understand that respect isn't negotiable. It's the minimum price of entry. He shifted in his chair, the power dynamics settling in like sand after a tide. And it's not just about you, I added, my voice softening slightly. This is about creating an environment where no one feels the way I once did. My people, our people, now deserve better than ridicule when they take risks. They deserve room to fail, to grow, to be heard. His expression wavered, and for the first time, I saw something raw in his eyes.
Shame.
Maybe recognition. So, what are your conditions then? He asked, his tone quieter. I ticked them off, deliberate and clear. First, transparency. No backroom deals, no keeping me in the dark. Second, mentorship, not just from me, but from you too. If we're building this agency together, then everyone deserves guidance, not judgment. Third, humility. Because if you can't admit when you're wrong, this will never work. He exhaled slowly, running a hand over his jaw. The man who once mocked me in front of a roomful of colleagues now sat across from me, listening, because he had no other choice. And finally, I said, leaning forward, voice calm but edged with steel, you'll never, ever speak to me or anyone on my team the way you spoke to me years ago. If you do, I'll walk. And when I walk, I'll take half this company with me. The words hung heavy between us. Not a threat, just truth. For a long moment, Daniel didn't respond. His eyes darted toward the window, then back to me. The pride in him warred with the reality in front of him. At last, he gave a slow nod. You've changed, Madison. No, I said softly, unclasping the silver locket in my hand beneath the table, feeling the engraving press into my skin. I didn't change. I became the woman I was always meant to be. He swallowed hard, then extended his hand across the table. Partners, then. I studied it for a beat before placing my hand in his. His grip was firm, but for the first time, I felt no intimidation, only balance, because the power was no longer his to give. The weeks that followed were nothing short of surreal. Daniel kept his word, at least so far. He sat in meetings and actually listened. He asked questions instead of cutting people off. When one of our junior designers pitched a bold idea, I watched him pause, consider, and finally nod in approval. It was a small thing, but I caught the look on that designer's face: pride, validation, relief. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about me anymore. Yes, part of me still carried the memory of that old humiliation, but another part of me, stronger now, understood that true power wasn't proving him wrong. True power was creating space so that no one else had to carry that same scar. At night, when the city quieted and my office emptied out, I'd sometimes sit alone at my desk. The orchids in the corner would lean toward the moonlight, and the glow from the skyline would spill across the floor. I'd unclasp the silver locket from around my neck and hold it in my palm. Prove them wrong. For years, those words had been my anchor, my fuel, my shield. But as I traced the engraving with my thumb, I realized they no longer stung. They no longer belonged to a place of pain. I had already proven them wrong. Now, the words felt more like a promise to myself. To keep going. To keep building. To keep lifting others the way Rachel once lifted me. Because if success was only about winning, then it would feel empty. But if it was about transformation, about turning cruelty into courage, doubt into drive, then it was something far greater. And maybe that was the irony of it all. Daniel Hartman hadn't just mocked me into shame. He'd unknowingly forged me into steel. The timid assistant was gone. In her place stood a partner, a leader, a woman unafraid to take up space. I closed the locket, slipped it back around my neck, and whispered into the stillness of my office, words I knew would echo in my voice for the rest of my life. They can mock your effort, but they can never mock what you become.